No shit.
When people talk about favorite Sith Lords or create their own personal lists of who is the most powerful or most fascinating, this Sith Lord is rarely ever mentioned, at least in my experience. Of course, based on the title alone, you will recognize I'm speaking about Naga Sadow again. First and foremost, yes, I am making another and hopefully this time definitive video about him, mostly due in part to the fact that I was not, nor have I been, happy with the other two videos of mine, which any of you who have bothered to look, which none of you probably have, but it doesn't matter, you may have seen that those two were deleted from my channel. It wasn't forced, it wasn't forced on me, it wasn't taken down or anything, it was just a personal choice. If you like those videos, then great. I thank you for the support and all, but as the creator of them myself, I can say they weren't all that great on a channel that is already admittedly very subpar. That out of the way, I think it needs to be said from the beginning this time rather than the end that yes, there is in fact a lot to say about Naga Sadow, or maybe not a lot that needs to be said, but plenty that should be said. For all intents and purposes, we have Sadow to thank for the realities of the Sith thousands of years after those in the universe have forgotten his name and history. Without him, the Great Hyperspace War would never have occurred, at least not within the context in which it did occur. This allowed the Jedi to see that their ancient enemy from the Second Great Schism in fact survived and had taken on a new form by way of the Sith people. Without his colossal failure, admittedly it's colossal, not only in the war, but in choice of apprentice by making this fool his acolyte, we would have never gotten to the Great Sith War. For my part, I know, in real life it wasn't exactly true. I mean, the Great Sith War comics came out, first and foremost, but lore-wise, I never would have gotten my favorite Sith Lord, Exar Kun and Ula Keldroma, and one of the greatest Jedi ever, and Nomi Sunrider. Ugh. Which for you Revan fanboys means no Revan or Malak, no Mandalorian Wars, no Jedi Civil War, and more ambiguously bad, now Great Galactic War and Bitchian.
Please clap.
Smoke weed every day. Smoke weed every day.
Past that point, however, I think it's safe to say that Naga Sadow had little impact on the wider galaxy, unless BioWare decides to pull something out of their backsides with him for some reason. I think it's safe to say we've really seen the end of any relevancy for Sadow. In canon, of course, but also for sure in Legends, I feel pretty safe in saying I don't think Disney nor anyone really in particular outside of Disney, no fans are clamoring to see more of Sadow. I think he kind of outlived his welcome even after the books, comics came out about him, because he didn't really have any lasting power. He doesn't have much of a presence. I mean, some mentions in SWTOR and some ambiguous kind of tones and ideas in the game that his importance was great and vast, but nothing really beyond that. I mean, after all, before SWTOR even came out, we were given a history video pretty much stating Naga Sadow took control of a random Jedi prodigy's body, fought a rather nameless and faceless, by the grand scale, Sith hiding as a Jedi, and he somehow lost. A Sith feigning being a Jedi by some miracle, defeated an ancient Sith Lord who directly took command of the Empire, left in Marker Ragnos' wake, and little else mind was given to him other than the Sith Emperor ordered he be cleansed from Yavin 4 because he couldn't be bothered with it himself. I'm not going to get into Vitiate again, for now at least, but needless to say, let's place another notch on the fucks not given meter for him. So, without boring everyone with another long backstory, which is a lie, let's state the basics for Sadow History 101, class First Day Basics. Naga Sadow was a Sith Lord in the ancient Sith Empire, not the one of the ancient Sith people encapsulated by figures like King Adas or Darth Kragros. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, oh well. But he didn't rule that empire, and it's a distinction I like to make simply because some people don't seem to care or even know. There was a Sith Empire before the Dark Jedi showed up. It was of the pure Sith people. It was the one that the Rakata came in contact with, the one that King Adas led and defeated the Rakata, repelled them from Korriban. They lived. But then that empire came to an end when the Dark Jedi defeating the Great Schism, or the Second Great Schism, arrived on Korriban and assimilated and kind of took on the titles and customs of Sith without actually, 100% being really Sith. Although Sadow is a man of distinctive human and Sith ancestry, he is not pure-blooded in the pure sense. I mean, by SWTOR logic, he is pure blood. But, again, if we're going back to the whole King Adas thing, the true purest blood Sith are long since destroyed. They've been mingled and mixed with the Dark Jedi outcasts. However that works, however we got there, we got there. Immensely powerful and stated to be both cunning and ambitious as any Sith Lord should be, he sought to take command of the Sith Empire at the height of its golden age, and unfortunately for the Empire, it was at this height, at the death of Marka Ragnos, who was the one to bring it to such heights in the first place. And, as we all know, Sith Emperors hardly leave stable command structures in their wake once they're dead. It's unfortunate for the Sith, of course. Anyone who's had to suffer Sith oppression, I'm sure, is very happy for that reality. Now, I made an error that, in retrospect, I am still a bit unclear about. I've heard some sources claim Naga Sadow was Ragnos' apprentice, and that's what I kind of went off of for the last couple of videos I talked about him. However, it's not really ever directly stated in any material that he was, or it's not said that he wasn't either. If he had been, perhaps the reins would have been more easily secured by him, rather than challenged by more conservatively minded Ludo Kresh. It makes sense in my mind that Sadow would have been one of, if not the only apprentice of Ragnos, but seeing as there's sparse thought and differing opinion, I can only say, I think, for myself, he may have been tutored by Ragnos at the least, if not an apprentice. Either way, he was a Sith Lord of great standing and power who garnered by some means the loyalty and adoration of the Massassi, themselves a subspecies of the Sith race who acted primarily as warriors in service to the Sith Lords, and who would come to be warped by their master Sadow into the more beastly abominations seen here, and as anyone who knows me knows, these are my preferred versions of the Massassi to begin with. So, for that I have to thank Sadow. Upon Ragnos' death, it was inevitable that struggle and strife would occur as he who amongst the Sith would reign supreme. The two clearest options were Sadow and Kresh, who I just mentioned a little bit before. Sadow is too ambitious for Kresh, who is not really afraid, so to speak, but he obviously wants to keep the Empire more inundated rather than allow it to sally forth into the wider unknown galaxy, which he and a lot of Sith Lords of the Sith Council at the time were more afraid of than I think they were willing to even say. He wanted to play it safe, so to speak, and center power around himself and the Sith, where Sadow wished to expand his glory, and to do thus, he had to expand the Empire. Conservative in theory, Ludo opposed Sadow's claim to the Empire, and the two fought before Ragnos' tomb and sarcophagus. Ragnos' spirit chose then to show up and basically go on about the history of the Sith and state that the strongest would succeed him and mention the end of the Golden Age if they didn't fight the right battles. Vague spirit stuff, as is the norm in Star Wars. Though the two would not get to finish their battle because Jory and Gav Dargon would appear on Korriban and be thrust headfirst into history because of it. I won't get into too much detail. I'm trying to limit myself this time, I swear to God. But these two made a blind jump, magically found Korriban. and they became immediate prisoners of the Sith. I may talk more about them in a quickie at a later date, but trust me, I'm sure someone else on YouTube has written an entire essay on these two alone and made it into a 40-minute long video. Alright, I mean, come on. We all know those types of videos are out there. I don't need to go there. So, since there were two fighting to become the Emperor and the Dark Lord of the Sith, there are similarly two responses to the Daragon twins showing up. And yes, they're twins. It's a common occurrence in Star Wars alongside terrible fathers. Ludo wished to kill the twins immediately, again to inundate the Sith and to keep both those within and without from expanding the Sith as a whole, while Naga wished to use the Daragons as a pretext for war to unite an empire that, by way of his and Ludo's disunion, was obviously already beginning to fracture following Ragnos' death. I mean, the signs are already there. The fact that you have the two of, if not the two most powerful of the Empire, are not even done with your funeral, and they're already trying to kill each other over your sarcophagus. The fractures are beginning to widen. But as I said before, the Sith Lords, by and large, agreed with Kresh and wanted to kill the Daragons. Now, a lot of what happened is minor, so I will say Naga stole some blasters held by the Daragons aboard their ship, committed a rescue of the twins, killed an old Sith Lord of high regard named Simus with those blasters, leaving them behind in his wake, and escaped pretty much unseen back to his fortress world of Kar-Shian. I hope I'm, again, saying that right. It's a made-up planet. Sue me. By this way, Naga convinced those detractors among the Sith Council to vote for war against the galaxy who they perceive now to be a direct threat against them based on the blaster evidence they had found in the aftermath of the attack in Simus's body. Ludo disagreed, as one is to do, and he would be dealt with by Sadow supposedly killing him in a brief civil war type, not really a civil war, it's more like a civil dispute over Sadow's fortress world of Cardelva. And Naga used the attack to trick Jory, who was being hidden there separate from Gav, into taking a ship. I don't remember if it's her ship. I think it is, because that makes most sense. Taking a ship back to the Republic and the as of yet named Empress Tata system. So she goes back there, alerts the Republic and all of them that the Sith are crazy, that she found the Sith, that they're holding Gav. You know, prepare for war. It's kind of a jump to make, but considering how the Sith acted around them, I think it's easy for her to come to the conclusion that, you know, maybe war is on the way because of these crazy bastards. Obviously, Naga defeated Ludo by trickery, again, long story short, and used Jory's ship in her escape to plant a tracking device so he could in fact follow her back into the core regions to begin his war. So that is a lot of background, and it's summarized to hell. I deeply recommend that everyone who is even vaguely interested in the story buy and read the Tales of the Jedi comics. But if you can, not from Disney, I'd rather you buy it from Dark Horse. I mean, they deserve all the love they can get for the work they put into it. Work that is now oversaturated and you're forgotten by the disgracefully samey and repetitive Marvel comics focusing on the usual bullshit of Imperials versus Rebels, and yes, Rebels comics, because Disney wants you to believe these fucks are the real Star Wars material.
Make me wish I could press a blaster pistol to my behavior core and pull the trigger.
But I digress. To come back around, Naga Sadow began the Great Hyperspace War by tracking Jory, and for some odd reason thought Gav would make a good apprentice. Don't ask me, that's the only thing about the comics that's kind of like, why? Maybe there's an explanation in there and I just wasn't paying that much attention. You tell me. Both twins had Force potential, but I guess Naga just liked having a dude as an apprentice over a chick, even though it's quite clear that Jory's the more capable between them. And oddly enough, Gav seems oddly okay with his new job at first. I mean, honestly, I never was that interested in the Daragons, as they seem to be something of a foil, kind of, for the reader. To be amazed and confused by all this old Star Wars stuff going on. Discovering the Sith for the first time, yada yada yada. Or, rediscovering them for the first time. However, considering we're actively reading, and in the thick of it all, it ends up feeling like just two characters who are somewhat going with the flow versus actually experiencing their own stories. It's a little pointless, the Daragon twins, I feel, but, it's not that big. It's not, it's not going to hurt the story. It doesn't hurt the story. It's just a little redundant is all. But needless to say, Naga gathered up all the Sith Empire minus one unrelenting asshole.
That is why you fail.
And launched his war. He uses a Sith meditation sphere to mass confuse and create hallucinations across the galaxy that throws the Republic and Jedi into disarray, essentially fighting nothing more than illusions. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The Great Hyperspace War is a confusing one. Based on what people and characters in the universe have said, they make it appear as though the war took at least a few days, while the comics themselves show a confusing, somewhat rushed flash of action scenes across several worlds, including a very old Coruscant. I choose to believe it had to take a few days or so, as again, we're led to believe the Sith were on the verge of actual victory from their ferocity in those battles. However, when Gav attacked Sadow, again, long story, but basically the Masazi under him killed an old friend, a Hutt, on his homeworld, and Jory engaged him in combat. He ran from the battle, went to go find Naga, and I guess fight him for what he made him become. It's, again, I am so disinterested in the Daragon twins. I don't remember clearly. I just read the comics a couple days ago to get ready for this. God, the Daragons are really boring. If someone can find redeeming qualities in them, that's great. I'm not saying they're bad characters. I'm just saying that for me, they're foils. They don't really add that much to the story overall. But Gav, I think, should be applauded for having what I think is the shortest Sith career ever, really. But as mentioned in my last video, Naga tells Gav, who just attacked him, to come aboard his ship. Mind you, Gav just shot at his sphere, disrupted Sadow's meditation, and fucked the entire war effort just with that one move. And Sadow calls him and is like, "No, man, come on. We'll talk about it. We will talk. We will smooth this over." And Gav does, for some inexplicable reason, go aboard the meditation sphere saying, "Alright, Naga, but I got my guns pointed at you, so don't pull no funny tricks." And lo and behold, Naga gets aboard Gav's old ship and fucking obliterates Gav. And gone. That's it. It's okay. Again, I think his character might have had a purpose at some point, but really I can't find it. But like I said, with his concentration broken, the Jedi and the Republic begin to realize that they're fighting like maybe a half or quarter of the real army. The majority of it is just illusions. So the war's lost. Once the hallucinations are broken, there's nothing left. Naga didn't really bring that big of an army against the Republic and their allies in the Empress Teta system, but the whole Empress Teta saga is, again, really auxiliary. Kind of like what happens on Onderon in the Great Sith War stuff. It's like, ooh, Onderon, okay, whatever. One world somehow tips the balance of an entire galactic war. I find that hard to believe, but that's just me. The war lost, Naga retreats back to Korriban. I think it's Korriban. And Ludo is still alive, lo and behold. He tries fighting Sadow one more time. You know, Civil Conflict Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. This weakens both Sadow's already depleted forces and those of Kresh. And in near defeat, Sadow has one of his ships ram in and destroy Kresh's ship, killing the wannabe Dark Lord, ending the civil conflict just in time for Empress Teta to show up with her and the Republic's forces, and they pretty much proceed to commit what is genocide on the Sith species. And at that time, Sadow decides to flee to Yavin 4, And Vichabitch does his own shenanigans. Not gonna go there. Sadow would live out the last years of his days building monuments, temples, and so forth for himself on Yavin 4, being the last true Sith amongst his vast Massassi forces, who, once again, are loyal to the end. They didn't care as long as they could serve their lord. And they elevated Sadow from Dark Lord to God figure. Whether or not they already thought of him as a god, I can't tell you. They don't really explore the Massassi mentality that much back then. And like I said before, Sadow would then begin experimenting on the Massassi. To what end? I have no idea. But he did. He turned them from this into this. And I'm just saying, personally, I like this original form better. It's more bulky, without looking too crazy. And I don't know, I just like the Sithy design, so to speak. I won't restate the absurd ending of his story as pushed by BioWare, as I mentioned earlier. But I will state more clearly how I feel about Sadow and why he should be considered among the greats and respected. I mean, his power is undeniable. We don't get a lot of show of his power, but consider how many other Sith have been capable, albeit with a meditation sphere helping him, of creating mass illusions across multiple, supposedly dozens upon dozens of worlds in a galaxy. I can't think of anyone. I mean, I know, Alima Keto, she had her illusions, and that's not really that big of a deal. But even Palpatine didn't bother, creating entire illusions across entire, systems and worlds. I'm sure there's some vague story and legends where he did make illusions all over the place, but I haven't seen it. So I'm going to give this point to Sadow. Admittedly, we have to recognize that he was not given a lot of chances to show his power within the confines of the comics. What we get with Sadow is a lord of great implied power rather than overt and loud examples of strength and dominance. Though what he lacks an overt show of power and force, he makes up for with wit and cunning. At least that's what I would argue. He's not, one of the Sith Lords who runs around screaming. He's charming, quote unquote. I don't know exactly what the parameters for charming are, but if I had to guess, I would say Sadow kind of falls into that kind of broad terminology. I can't say fairly nor honestly that he's on Palpatine's level. Let me just stipulate that I, despite my last statement, Palpatine is obviously still stronger than Sadow, I think. But he's not a fool, nor is he a blunt object like Vader or Malgus, who both lack a certain degree of finesse in how they seek or sought to rule their own cliques. What we have in Sadow is a lord in the ancient design, someone who was liberal in his understanding and desires for the Sith Empire, and I don't mean that in a modern political observation, so please don't bring your political nonsense to my channel. But what we have to consider in a broad sense of what it means to be liberal or conservative, what the Empire faced following Ragnos' death. The conservative recline into their own base and power under Kresh is essentially anathema to what it means to be Sith. Sadow, in this way, is more Sith than Ludo, because he sought to conquer and assert dominance when most among the Sith Council desired to keep themselves hidden and unknown. Once again, if you're not actively trying to better yourself, strengthen yourself, empower yourself, and because of this, the Sith as a whole, then you're not really following what it means to be Sith, nor are you showing the merits of a Sith. Sadow, again, is more Sith in that way because Kresh wanted to sit on his laurels. He didn't care. He was afraid. And fear is useful, but not when it takes you to the point of inaction like Kresh wanted. Of course, you could make the argument that Kresh only wanted to oppose Sadow, so whatever Sadow wanted, Kresh was against, but they don't go that deep into Kresh's character, nor do I think they'd ever really want to. Once again, he's a little more one-note than even the Daragons. But Sadow was ambitious, and among the Sith, ambition, tempered with cunning and wit, more often than not leads to some of the greatest amongst their number. However, ambition alone does not always ensure success, and his wit led to that ultimate killer of the Sith, who we know as arrogance. He made several mistakes, and those were chiefly influenced by his arrogance. He thought he could contain and then destroy Ludo, but he didn't follow up his victory by checking if there was even a body. And Ludo would come back and do harm to Sadow's forces and splinter the already badly fractured and dying empire in its last hours of life support. He didn't perceive that Gav may not have been controlled or controllable, or even ready to actually commit to the Sith ideology. The only conclusion to be made is that he alone believed himself strong enough or charismatic enough to contain and control Gav, who, for the life of me, I will never understand how, of all the people he could have chosen from, Gav Daragon. But even still, we have to commend Sadow for attempting to fulfill the ambitions of what it is to be Sith, to expand and conquer and to empower himself along with his people by ways of his domination. All the rest were willing to sit upon their laurels, as I said, and were uncommitted to the very ideals of the Sith, because they sought power, but totally restrained themselves. And don't get me wrong, a Sith that can temper their power is good, and their ambition, but those who really sit idly and keep themselves recluse are inherently anathema to the Sith. Unless you can somehow create an ideology that doesn't bastardize it like Krayt did, or like Vitiate did, whether or not he gave a damn, then you are essentially not following the basic tenets of what the Sith Code wants you to do. But then again, as I have said many times before, the Sith Code is more malleable, so it's kind of up to interpretation. However, within the confines of how we are shown the Sith to be, it's anathema to how they are. Did Sadow fail? Yes, he did, and because of it, he is to blame in a sense for the devastation and attempted genocide of the Sith species by the Republic and its allies. However, he did lay the foundation for what is meant to be Sith, and how they would act for thousands of years to come. Recorded among the greats of the ancient order of the Sith, Sadow's name comes up usually chiefly, if not, maybe Ragnos. Because were it not for his war, the Great Hyperspace War, Itchy Vitchy here would not have formed his empire as he did, whether or not he actually gave a damn, like I said, about it or not. That's a whole other argument. Oh god, this is an argument. He, Sadow, would lay the foundation for Freedon Nad and Exar Kun, who would instigate a pogrom that would scar the Jedi, kill, we're led to believe, many masters among their number, and shake their faith in their own abilities to teach the Jedi. They would be so scarred by what had occurred with Kun and Kildroma and their turns to the dark side that they would refuse entry into the Mandalorian Wars because they didn't know if fast entry into more conflict was the right way to go. This led directly to Revan and Malak's splinter and eventually the Jedi Civil War. Again, if we somewhat disregard the retroactive BS SWTOR said about Revan and Malak, I guess, being mind-controlled, then, this is the more preferred story here. I don't know. Again, I try to fit SWTOR into my lore. It's really difficult, but there you go. I could go on, because history is like a drop of water in the pool. It has echoes, and every drop echoes carry on for thousands of years. And, you could say that about anybody. Every single person is a drop in the freaking water. Sadow's little splash in the pool just happened to be a little bit louder and bigger than most. Without Sadow, we may well have seen a more reclusive and fearful empire, is what I'm trying to say. Too afraid of the beyond to dare challenge the might of the Republic and Jedi, and in that case, maybe they would wait too long for the Republic and the Jedi, and in that time, those two would become too powerful to even match. Without Sadow and the Sith, the Republic itself would not have become what it had or evolved as it did. The Sith Empire is just as much responsible for the Republic as the Jedi for its history and its strength. Because without the conflict, which is ironic considering the whole idea of what it is to be Sith, if you think about it, if it weren't for the Sith constantly pushing and testing the Republic would not have become as powerful as it did, which, as we all know, eventually led to Palpatine. That's thousands of years in the future, but that's the reality of it. The Republic became stronger and stronger, more tightly bound, more tightly knit, more devolved, in a sense, into its kind of self-protection and self-awareness, that the Sith Empire, by conflict, made the Republic stronger. And in that way, the Republic was a manifestation of the very Sith ideology they wished to fight against. Among the great figures that helped shape the Republic and the Jedi, chief among them has to be counted Naga Sadow. And I will hold to that. I firmly believe that. And I think that he is a Sith of greatness, indeed. And I will always hold to that. People thought that I was not giving him his fair due, but I have always held that Sadow has been one of the great history makers, if not one of the most powerful Sith Lords in history. He certainly made history. And more important than power itself within any fantasy universe, if you don't have an impact on history, then you don't have an impact on the reader. You don't have an impact on the reader, then you're just noise. And I think it's safe to say Sadow was far more than noise. And I will leave it there.